This episode of the podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/lightscameranonsense. Visit patreon.com/lightscameranonsense to help support your favorite new movie podcast. Now, let's roll that reel.
After Midnight. After Hours, the Weekend album.
Oh, that's definitely what you're looking at.
After Midnight. Blink-182 song.
Why is it all music?
I don't know. There's a film called After Midnight that came out in 1989 from the Wheat Brothers.
Is that the one? That's the one with Ethan Hawke.
It's not the one with Ethan Hawke. It looks like it's got flames on it and some guy who's going whoa. So that's not it. It's the Richard Linklater Before trilogy, so you're already off to a bad start. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
After Midnight's a better name. You dropped the ball.
Richard Linklater? He dropped the ball? Well,
yeah.
He's way more successful than you. So I feel like he can rub that in our face.
I don't know.
Was he was the same director who did Boy, where he filmed a movie over 14 years?
I believe so, yeah.
Or was that Terrence Malick?
No, I don't think
Boyhood? It was Boyhood. Yeah. Where he filmed it from 2001 to 2013.
Was it Linklater or Malick?
It was Linklater.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a classic Linklater. Dazed and Confused.
Classic Linklater.
Zach, how has your weekend been so far?
Stressful, but I don't want to get into that.
Oh, okay. All right. We don't have to dive into that.
How's your weekend been?
Stressful. For all the wrong reasons. I mean, it hasn't been stressful. I'm actually glad we delayed the podcast recording today because one of the things I had started, I was like literally halfway through, and I had to finish it this morning. And it's like a movie you watch at night, but I kept like, it was Friday night, I tried to start it, and then Saturday night I tried to start it, but I had other stuff going on, so luckily I watched other stuff, but not much. It's the summertime, we're summertime boys. Just
summertime living.
What is it? Boys of Summer. Like it's Don Henley. Yeah.
Or the Ataris if you're talking about the 90s version.
Oh man, no, I only know the Henley version. The Ataris. We're just gonna keep talking about music on this podcast.
Yeah.
The last two episodes are vaguely named after songs. So I feel like we should probably keep up the trend with this episode. I don't know what you think.
There's another episode that was we're a music podcast now,
yeah.
So apparently we're just all in on that.
It's a new trend. Hello everyone and welcome to Lights Camera Nonsense, where we keep you up. Nope. Fuck.
We keep you up.
We keep you up all night long. Oh, we went different routes with that. Hello everyone and welcome to Lights Camera Nonsense, where we give you all the latest movie magic you may have missed. I'm Nick Goosebumps Simmons.
Yeah.
It'll tie into the other thing.
And I'm Zach Against the Grain Smith.
Gross. Or wait, it depends. Against the Grain, like, do you
culturally?
Oh, I was gonna say, do you think like when you hear the phrase "against the grain," do you think like against the grain when it comes to like hair, or do you think like against the grain when it comes to like cultural, like what you said?
Well, see as how my brain functions in a way that I can connect the dots to two separate things individually. I can think of both. And by the way, you're supposed to shave with the grain, not against it.
What? No, that's if you want it to grow in slower, right?
If you don't want to tear your skin up.
I mean, it depends. If you want it to like not get like a 5 o'clock shadow and you just want it to be like smooth for a bit, like if you're interviewing for a job or whatever. I don't know. Look, we both have beards. We don't know how to shave. So let's just move on. On July 11th, 2021, let's dive into the previews. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're watching us a day late. You can actually watch us on Patreon at patreon.com/lightscameranonsense for just $1. That's one grilled burrito, a grilled breakfast burrito, I think is what I keep saying. What's another dollar equivalent? You can buy those like rubber balls that you get from like arcade machines or whatever. Or you can
dollar menu. There's a whole menu.
Okay, all right. You get a McDouble, but I don't want to bring McDonald's into this. It feels like a sponsor, and I don't want to get sponsored by McDonald's. It just seems like a.
I'll shill for McDonald's.
You'll shill for McDonald's, really?
Yeah, for sure.
I guess we have such low standards on this podcast.
Just a dead eye stare into the camera.
But we understand if you can't watch us on YouTube or on Patreon and you just want to listen to us while you're driving to work, that's okay. The day after this gets uploaded to YouTube, we are also on every podcast service available, including Spotify, iTunes, Last.fm, and more. But enough about that. Zach, what have you been watching?
So, before we started recording, I made you a guarantee, Nick. I said I had watched 2 things, and I guaranteed that you did not watch the 2 things that I watched.
And I doubt it.
You doubt that you didn't watch it?
I doubt that I haven't watched... Yeah, that I haven't watched the things that you watched. I was very prolific in my...
I just meant this week you haven't watched the things that I watched this week.
Are they as new as a week, or are they older things? Okay, well then I might have watched it just in the past, not this week.
Yeah, that wasn't the guarantee though. The guarantee was the things that I'm bringing. I'm not. You misunderstood.
What did you watch? What did you watch?
So the first thing I watched His House. This is a 2020 horror like Sundance film sort of thing that was bought by Netflix. So if you want to watch it, it is on Netflix.
Okay.
The plot revolves around this immigrant family from Sudan who has emigrated to
I remember the trailer for this.
To England.
Yeah.
And they are given a house as a kind of like a probationary period living situation by a caseworker who's played by Matt Smith.
No relation.
No relation. I wish I was related to Matt Smith. Fuck, that dude has a bunch of money from playing the Doctor.
I was gonna say from playing that one-off character in the Terminator Genesis movie, or he's been in a lot of weird sci-fi movies where he's like the main lead, but the movie never.
He has bit parts all over the place. Yeah. He'll just like show up in things. But Doctor Who is probably his most prolific.
Oh yeah, and he's going to be in the new Game of Thrones show.
Yes.
Oh, and he was in The Crown. Sorry, go on. Sorry, I keep just derailing you.
You're good. Yeah. So this family has immigrated to like this. It doesn't really specify the town. It's just kind of like a small English town, and they're given this house to live in and told like, okay, for your probationary period. You're gonna get a stipend, which is like barely anything. It's you
more like a per diem really kind of thing.
Not kind of, yeah. It's like 75 pounds. I don't remember what the currency.
Those English, they're crumpets and tea and.
It's really fucking low. It's to the point where, sorry, I have like something in my eye and it's not coming out. To the point where you wouldn't really expect someone to be able to live off that in a normal situation. And the house that they're given is like this rundown shithole, but it's pretty big and they're the only ones living in it. So there's like this kind of constant like range of subtle racism to like just straight up racism being directed towards them because they're immigrants and they're generally looked down upon by their surrounding neighbors and townsfolk. But while they're in the house, the main thing is that it turns out their house is haunted, essentially.
Classic.
By a I'm trying to think of what it's called.
Ghost?
I gotta pull it up. No, it's a
Is it like a very specific type of monster?
Yeah, it's a specific type of monster. They call it a night witch.
Ooh.
Apeth. They call it an apeth, which is like there's a bunch of like South African mythology sort of stuff weaving throughout here.
But they're in England. How does how does this work?
So the ghost, the night witch or whatever, has cursed them as they were emigrating.
Oh, okay.
So like their house is haunted, but really it's kind of like the situation of like they're the haunted ones, you know.
Yeah.
So they're seeing visions of they have this. The story presents it where they have lost their daughter while crossing over into England.
Mm-hmm.
So they're haunted by her ghost amongst all the other people that they were traveling with. At one point, they're on a boat and it capsizes, and so there's a bunch of like dead bodies in the ocean that they're traveling through. So they're seeing a bunch of them pop up, and you have your two leads, which are most notably Wunmi Masaku.
Yeah.
Which you'll recognize her from things like Lovecraft Country, or she's most recently in Loki as Hunter B. What's the name of the
Hunter B20? I think
something like that. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure this is like one of his first things he's done. I didn't really recognize anything from his full filmography, but there Sope Dirisu is the husband. So the husband is trying to kind of like take on his new living situation. He's trying to assimilate into the new culture, whereas the wife is holding on to what they left behind. And so there's like this tug and pull of like trying to bury and forget the past and just move on, and then also trying to respect it and live with it. I don't want to go too much into details because it's fairly story and twist heavy.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at it's quite good.
It's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Critic wise, I think the audience score is probably more in line with the general. The audience score I think is like around like a high 70 or something. I would probably put it in like the mid 80 range. Very well shot.
74%
for a horror movie. It is tense, but there's not like a whole lot of like scary things. There's not like nightmare fuel or anything like that. There is one scene near the end that is like kind of gross, but it's not like gory or anything. It's not like gonna give you night terrors or anything like that.
Right.
It's more introspective and thought-provoking, I think, for a horror movie.
More thriller than it is horror.
Yeah, and or drama based, really. It's very centralized on its characters and how they are. The closest thing I can come up with is like literary horror, and not like Stephen King literary, like
gothic kind of horror,
gothic or psychological horror, sort of, where it is presenting an argument or ideas and then expounding those into horror territory. So with that, you get a lot of good direction, and the performances are phenomenal. There's just not like a whole lot of like, ooh, that was scary, or you know that kind of stuff. It's just more like tense stuff. But yeah, still very good. Hadn't even heard of it until I just stumbled across it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely give it a watch. It's pretty quick. I think it's only like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, with credits.
Yeah. So yeah, quite enjoyable, and yeah, not your standard horror fare.
I had seen the trailer for it, but I think I had watched the trailer before it had come out onto Netflix, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. It gives me very Jordan Peele-esque vibes when it comes to giving a different perspective on horror. And
it's very I say this as someone who didn't particularly like. I thought this movie was okay, but I wasn't raving about it like a lot of other people were. But it's very similar to Babadook.
Oh, okay.
Where you have a very centralized, contained story that is more focused on the characters that are being terrorized rather than the terror.
Yeah.
You know?
Trying to create
that's
a mythology
probably
for that terror and everything.
Yeah, that's probably its closest contemporary that I can think of.
Okay. Well, that's if you line it up with that as a recommendation, I'd be like, I'm interested in checking it out. It's
I enjoyed this. Yeah, I enjoyed this more than Babadook.
Oh, okay.
So take that as you will.
I will.
And then the other thing I watched the first season of Miracle Workers.
Fuck. All right, you got me. I haven't watched it. Again,
so even by your definition, you haven't watched.
I haven't watched either of them ever. But to be fair, His House is still new-ish in that it came out last year. It's still within like a year of it coming out. And Miracle Workers, I have no interest in because it looks like a very stereotypical kind of TBS kind of sitcom-y feel to it. I don't know. I mean, like the only draw is Daniel Radcliffe, and I don't know if he's still not enough.
Steve Buscemi.
He's still not enough. And now it's like an anthology, like they're time traveling to different periods.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know this when I started it. I didn't know until I was done with the first season that they are doing this kind of anthology setup where every season is a different story.
Yeah.
So I think the second season is like in the Dark Ages, and the third season, which actually just came out, or it's about to come out in like a couple days, is the Oregon Trail. So
just like the worst time periods to be alive in.
Early settler type era.
Yeah.
In North America. So for the uninitiated, Miracle Workers is I believe it's a TBS/FX partnership.
I'll look it up.
Is a 20-minute kind of sitcom. I don't really want to call it a sitcom because it's not really a sitcom where like each new episode is a different problem, and then by the end of that, the problem is solved, and like everything is back to its status quo. It's more of just a general comedy narrative.
It's in this weird genre of not necessarily being a comedy or a drama or even a dramedy, where it's a weird mixture of the two. But it's similar to shows like Atlanta and Dave, which I haven't mentioned, but I'll talk about here in a minute. And other shows on FX and TBS where they're trying to give like an actual story, a thorough line from each episode to each episode. There's another one called like, I don't know if it's called The Road Trip, or it's like a family who go driving on a road trip and then everything goes wrong. And it's on TBS. I can't remember the name of it, but it's got like a plot so from like the end of one episode to the beginning of another, it's like it continues that story. It's not just like a setup like Big Bang Theory or Mom or any of those.
To me, it's very similar, not only in theme and topic, but also just in general style to The Good Place.
Yeah.
So going back a little bit. It is a 20-minute, for lack of a better word, comedy narrative, starring Daniel Radcliffe, Steve Buscemi, and then
do we look up whether it was Buscemi or Buscemi?
I think it's Buscemi.
Okay, doesn't matter,
but I'm not positive.
No.
Geraldine Viswanathan.
You just made that up.
I didn't.
Sure.
And
okay.
Karan Soni, who you'll probably recognize as Dopinder from Deadpool.
Yeah.
And it starts off with Buscemi's god going, you know what? Earth is too much work. I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to blow it up and just be done with the whole thing. And Viswanathan is a newly... Maybe not. No, she's not new. She's been in Heaven for a while, and Heaven is kind of made up into this kind of corporate entity called Heaven Inc., where everyone has their own individual departments of, like, taking care of the Earth. So you have the cloud department, the bug department, there's a genital department, amongst other things. And she's done with being in the dirt department because
not a lot going on there.
Dirt.
Yeah.
And she wants to make a difference, so they transfer her to the Department of Answered Prayers, which is comprised of one person, which is Daniel Radcliffe, and he has the unfortunate duty of being the only one to answer everyone in the Earth's prayers, but you can only do it via natural occurrences. So someone prays like, can you please help me find my car keys? And the bit is he has to melt individual snowflakes like one every hour. So
wait, what?
Until because so like the keys are lost in the snow.
Oh, okay.
I
needed that detail.
Yeah, sorry. It's like, wait, what, snow? Yeah, so this lady's looking for her keys, and she's like in this snowstorm, essentially, and she's like, I can't find my keys. And to answer that prayer, he melts a snowflake like one per hour until like it cuts back to her and it's like midnight. It's been several hours, and she's like, oh, my keys.
Okay.
But that's like all he's been able to do is just these small like little things, and they explain it by like, yeah, this department hasn't been like upgraded or funded anymore since like the beginning of time, so they never expected the Earth to get this big and have this many people. It was mainly for like the 50 people running around at any one time. So Viswanathan gets transferred to this new department with Daniel Radcliffe, and she's more of a like brash, like take charge sort of personality. So within minutes of being there, she's caused earthquakes and typhoons because she's done things that are not small or naturally occurring. Like she sees this farmer praying for rain so his crops will survive. So she gives him like this downpour that's not supposed to be in the area generally, and it ends up causing this huge fucking hurricane that kills thousands of people. By the way, this is very dark comedy.
I was about to say.
There's a lot of instances where it'll cut to like a newscast that is like the newscast on Earth reacting to the things that they've done, and it's like this fire took out like hundreds of people, and as a newscaster, I have not seen a more horrendous sight in my time. And it's
so you have to have a pretty dark sense of humor in order to enjoy this show, probably.
So while she's down there, she makes a bet with God to save the Earth, and if she can answer one impossible prayer by the end of, I believe it's 2 weeks, then he won't blow up the Earth. And Steve Buscemi is kind of like this weird like moron as God. Like he can't read. He's illiterate.
Okay.
And he's just a
weird take.
He can't do anything. So when he makes the bet, his wager is that if he wins the bet, not only does the Earth blow up, and he's kind of whatever about that, but she also has to eat a worm, and that's what he's really fixated on, is like her having to eat a worm in front of everybody. And yeah, he's just like this dumb weirdo. So the impossible prayer that she ends up picking is getting two people to fall in love / kiss one another, because they're both interested in each other, but they're super shy, so they're never going to initiate. So the whole first season, which is 7 episodes, is about the
short.
Department of... it is very short. The Department of Answered Prayers, trying to get these two people to come together and finally admit their feelings and kiss, which will then save the world. So yeah, all that to say that is the setup. Pretty funny. I did enjoy it. And yeah, easy watch. I'll definitely watch the second season for sure, just to see if the similar momentum is applied there. And with it being an anthology series, it's kind of like hit or miss whether or not certain things will work and other things won't.
Like in regards to like jokes landing, or
just the general setup, because the setup for the second season is not related to the first at all. So when the first ends, it's like that's the end of that story, and the second one is going to be something different.
Yeah, so I don't know the setup and why it turns into an anthology series. So you don't either?
Not it's at least not said by the end of the first season. I don't know if it's stated at the beginning of the second. Each season supposedly is based on a work on of Simon Rich, which is like a humorist writer.
Oh, okay.
So I guess
sense.
That's what
adds
they're doing. Yeah. Pretty enjoyable and easy watch. Got quite a few laughs out of it. Probably one of the better things that Radcliffe has done. Have
you seen Swiss Army Man?
I haven't seen Swiss Army Man, and I haven't seen Guns Akimbo. The last thing I saw was either, I don't remember what came afterwards, Horns or the friend rom-com one.
The Woman in Black. There is
that was pre.
That was
Horns.
Right after Harry Potter. So it was Woman in Black. Yeah. It was Horns, which is made from the Joe Hill book. The rom-com, I believe, is called, that I'm recalling from memory and not looking up. Definitely not using Google. Jungle. No, he's in a movie called Kill Your Darlings, Guns Akimbo, Horns, Swiss Army Man, What If? That was the movie.
That's it.
And also Now You See Me Too. Don't forget that.
I did not see Now You See Me Too because I didn't even like the first one, and from what I understand, that was the better of the two.
Yeah, because the second one is just more, except they use like actual unbelievable, impossible things. Oh, he's in Victor Frankenstein with
oh, I did see that. Yeah, that wasn't very good.
Yeah, where he plays Igor.
It was okay.
Daniel Radcliffe, what you doing? He's just trying not to be like another, like, mainly. He's always trying to do a different role.
Yeah, well, he was done with all the franchise stuff by the time Harry Potter ended. So.
I say that knowing we just talked about he was in his sequel for a franchise, because Now You See Me 3 is in development.
Yeah, but he wasn't in the first one,
right? And
he was the villain in the second one, in which I assume he received some sort of comeuppance.
Kind of. He's going to be in the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio movie.
Oh.
Did you know that?
I didn't.
Holy shit.
Have you super off track and random tangent?
Oh, I don't give a fuck.
Did you read that interview with Guillermo del Toro talking about how Universal came to him for the Dark Universe and offered him basically carte blanche over any monster he wanted?
Was this after or before? Oh, this was before, when they were actually developing
before.
it.
It was when they were developing. I think it was in the middle of The Mummy when they were in production for that great. Tom Cruise, The Mummy. Yeah. And they came to him and was like, "Hey, we want you for Frankenstein," and Frankenstein is like apparently one of his favorite movies ever.
Yeah.
Like it's a huge influence for him, and he was dying to do it. And they approached him and was like, "Hey, not only will we give you Frankenstein, but we want you to head the rest of this dark universe.
Yeah, be a Feige.
And you could do anything you want. You could just whatever. You have free reign." And he didn't want to get tied down, and coincidentally enough, he didn't want to get tied down into a franchise or a big thing at the time. So he said no. And then we got what we got with the Dark Universe.
I mean, well, luckily he didn't get tied down to something that was dead in the water. I think he definitely lucked out. He didn't have any control over the Mummy.
No, he didn't. But he wasn't. He wasn't part of that at all.
So
But the lead into that was he did an interview talking about that, and he was like, "Yeah, I feel like that's one of my biggest regrets of all time, and I'll probably die regretting that." And it's like, fuck, that is a downer. That is so depressing.
Well, I mean, he's
because.
Sorry, go ahead.
Usually you see, well, it's like usually you see those interviews and they're kind of like trying to play like down the middle of like yeah, I mean that would have been interesting for sure, but in the end, yeah, I'm glad I took the road I took, because usually it's in response to like something failing spectacularly, i.e. the Dark Universe.
Yeah.
But with this, it's like the complete opposite of like someone realizing they had their dream project in front of them, and then not taking it, and then regretting it for the rest of their life.
Well,
it's
I mean,
fucking kill me.
We were just talking about this because an old interview popped up about Matt Damon turning down the main lead in the Avatar movie, which he would have gotten 10% of the earnings from Avatar back in 2009. Actually, for the entire theatrical run of Avatar. So he would have made over $280 million off of just being in the... I mean, he would have showed up for the sequels, but off of just one movie, he would have made $280 million for that paycheck over the course of 11 years. But
yeah, I think his line was, "You'll never meet someone who turned down that much money."
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to tell just from like reading the interview whether or not he feels like he regrets that. Because I feel like from all of the other movies that he's done since 2009 to now, I'm sure he doesn't regret doing those movies either.
Yeah. The tone I got from it was that he was, he accepted, the state of it. It was like, well, what can you do?
Yeah. I'm gonna go do Elysium real quick. I'll interview you guys later.
Hey, let's talk about carbon. What is it? Greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Let's talk about greenhouse
He's been
gases.
in so many environmental movies in the last 10 years. It's almost like he's pushing Leonardo DiCaprio aside. Anyway, but that was all that you watched?
Those are the two things I watched, yeah. Just wrapping up Miracle Workers, I guess. Yeah, pretty good show. I'd say give it a watch. I don't think it is TBS, but it doesn't, like... I guess in your terms of looking at it, I don't get a TBS sort of feel from it.
No, like it's like People of Earth or I mean,
but you like that one.
No, I did like that one. I'm saying that there have been more recently, like in the last few years, where there've been shows with a thorough line story that that aren't necessarily just straight comedies with a laugh track played after each joke. It's just like you're supposed to laugh along with it, and if you don't, then you don't. Like the story doesn't depend on that. So I like that.
But that is it for me, sir. What did you watch?
I watched so many things. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Matt Damon's filmography, and I'm looking at all of the ones that technically have like environmental undertones. Can I list off some of them real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
So The Martian,
Don't mind me.
I feel like might have... I mean, technically it's not really about environmentalism per se.
It is there.
It's there, though. If you read the book that it's based off of, it definitely is. Stillwater, obviously, is about the town in Stillwater. You'll have to look that up for me. I think it's, like, Montana or something. But he's just this hick kind of guy who's... like, hey, our water supply is poisoned. Why is this company that's poisoning our water supply doing this? And he's, that just came out like this year.
Oklahoma,
thank you. Elysium, which of course is like, I live on a trash planet. Earth sucks. I want to go live in paradise in the space station. And, Neil Blomkamp.
Oh, Wall-E.
Yeah, it's Wall-E. It's an action-y Wall-E. Interstellar, which again is kind of, he plays the same character in The Martian that he did in Interstellar, which came out the same year. Let's see, Contagion in a different way, is kind of about like taking care of yourself. You get downsizing. Let's see, Deadpool 2.
The Adjustment Bureau.
Okay, now we're just kind of like, we're casting a very wide net. That's where he's like trying to argue against God about the actual grand plan of things. Anyway, Bagger Vance. I watched so many things. So, have you caught up on Loki at all? You haven't watched episode 4
No,
or 5?
no. So that was my middle name bit, is of the things you would expect me to come into this podcast.
Very disappointed in you.
There's an ongoing big release, which I'm now two episodes behind.
Yeah.
No, I watched the previous one. I did watch the one I had missed last week, but I haven't watched this week's. And then I didn't watch Black Widow, which is the biggest release of the week.
Yes.
That and Space Jam.
So you didn't watch F9, which makes sense. I understand. Yeah. Which was last week. But was that last week or the week before?
That was last week.
Oh, crap. But I did watch Black Widow, but I kind of want to... We'll smush them all together. Loki episode 4 and 5. Obviously, if you haven't started watching it at this point, you're probably not going to watch episode 4 and 5, unless you're Zach and you're just waiting and going to lose. You're going to lose the thread, you know.
No, it's not that. Our watch cycle is basically staggered at this point,
right?
So now we're gonna get to the end, and we'll just be able to like kind of steamroll the last hour,
okay,
or 2 hours of content.
So I'll briefly go over episode 4 and 5, and then we can kind of compound it into episode 6 next week for the next episode. That is, if you watch it. it's still
I'll watch it.
It's quite a bit of watching just because they're longer episodes, but it's great stuff. There's a lot of. It started off being kind of this cool, mysterious, anything can happen because they're time traveling and go into different time periods and all this kind of stuff, while also tying into the greater MCU just enough to make people question everything, much like how we covered it 2 weeks ago with episode 3, and introducing characters and Easter eggs, especially in episode 5. There is a whole, like, the entire episode takes place in, I won't spoil it for you, Zach, but in a separate kind of
I've watched episode 4 and seen the post credits for that, so I know where that next episode takes place.
But I mean, there are so many Easter eggs that you'll see, like just in the background when you're watching episode 5.
Yeah,
there's a Thanos copter. And there's
I've seen the Thanos helicopter.
The Throg shows up for just a blink and you'll miss it moment. It's great. Apparently, Chris Hemsworth shows up to voice one line for an animated frog in an episode of Loki. But yeah, great stuff. I'm really interested into seeing where episode 6 kind of ties everything together, and hopefully it does without leaving too many questions, because I know this show will lead directly into, I believe, Thor 4 to a degree, and also Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness.
Something to note as well for Loki is it's the only one in which pre-release that people like Kevin Feige were like, we could foresee doing multiple seasons of this. Whereas with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they were pretty
self-contained,
metered on that. It was like, well, these are lead-ins to other things. So probably not, unless there was a really good reason to explain why there would be another season of this.
I think it's definitely up to Tom Hiddleston and the other cast. I can see Owen Wilson walking away, depending on how he impacts the finale, because the way he kind of walks away from episode 5, we may not see him in the finale, which is okay. Just kind of depends on who the big bad is. And there have been a lot of theories, and I can theorize all day, but I honestly don't want to do that because I don't want to build up my expectation for the finale, because it has destroyed me the last 2 Marvel Disney Plus shows. I will say that there have also been points in episodes 4 and 5 that have disappointed me greatly, in that they are very standard Marvel fare, and I feel like they're not learning or listening to the audience and what they're complaining about, but that's okay.
Well,
they've got a grand plan, scheme, whatever.
They do, and something to note again for these Marvel shows is they were in production generally around all the same time, and especially with COVID, that kind of all got squished together.
Yeah. Late 2019,
so
2020.
It's a lot harder for them to have taken any lessons that they could have learned from the previous two shows and apply it elsewhere. I think we won't see.
I mean, more from like all Marvel properties. There are some
like the Netflix stuff, or just in movies in general.
Just in general. I mean, there are still some CGI-ness that could have been fixed, and not in that it looks bad, but in that like, oh, we've seen this before, you know. Or there's still creative things that they're doing with this show, and obviously ideas that they're pulling not only from comics but from, like, they're using straight up theories and throwing them in as lines of dialogue for characters, like, oh, I'm the Loki that did this, and you know, there was definitely somebody who was watching that episode and heard that line and went, I thought of that theory, that's what I thought happened to the original, and you know, so it's great that they are listening. They're just not listening to a lot of the more rational arguments as to the things that could be fixed to make the shows and movies better. But
stop killing off your villains would be
I mean, yeah, but like we talked about it in the past with a previous Loki episode, I think it was 2 or 3, where we're definitely getting a kind of not a cookie cutter, but like a format into how they are setting up the plots for not only the shows but the future of the MCU. And there's this not moral, but kind of a lesson. No, it is more of a moral, but that the main characters of each of these shows are trying to live up the potential of the their namesake, and also trying to live with the ramifications of their decisions, while also facing versions of themselves. And that also leads into Black Widow, but also kind of not. Black Widow is weird because there are so many things that Black Widow was trying to accomplish with the original release, and it just kept getting delayed due to COVID. I'll step away from Loki because I want to definitely talk about it once you've got it all under your belt. Once you get all of Loki under your belt,
hat, jacket, butt pocket,
under your clothes. Get Loki under your clothes. Now, Black Widow is it was supposed to come out in early 2020 and getting constantly delayed. I think 3 times it got delayed, all the way up until this Friday, and it dropped. And it's not only in theaters, but it's also on Disney Plus, their Premier Access platform. And I gotta say, it's okay. It has
pretty much what I've heard.
The characters are great. I love Florence Pugh. I love David Harbour. The life that they bring into the characters that they have in the script are fantastic. I love a lot of the diegetic, and not only the what is the word? Just the rapport that the characters have with each other. It definitely feels like they're familiar with each other, and there was definitely a camaraderie behind the scenes, I assume, with the actors involved with the project. But starting off with the beginning of the film is weird because it has an opening credits.
Really?
Like, so there's the Marvel lead in, and they have the cold open and everything, and then there's another scene after that, and then it bleeds into an opening credits that's like very spy thriller-esque,
like a Bond sort of thing.
or a Bourne Identity kind of thing. And then after the credits for that, it goes and does a hard cut to another scene, and I'm like, this is weird because that's not very Marvel-ish. But everything about this movie is very not out of touch, but like it feels different from everything. And maybe because we haven't watched a Marvel movie in theaters for 2 years now, well, a year and a half, it's kind of jarring to see. But the movie definitely feels out of place. I think that with the stakes being what they are, knowing what happens to Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow in Avengers Endgame, it definitely leaves much to be desired with her character. Like, I feel like they leave her at the end of the film just as hope you enjoyed this adventure, a solo adventure with this character. Oh, well, now she's gone, so we're gonna replace her with a different character. And
so with your feelings on this one, how do you feel about the statement from Feige coming out saying that they're not opposed to doing more of these sort of like in between / prequel stories?
You mean they are opposed, or that
they're not opposed, meaning they would do more.
Oh, I thought you were going to lead that into not signing for multiple movies as well.
Yeah, that was another thing. There was a lot of Marvel stuff that came out over the last week that they're not doing the multi picture deals for actors now.
I think what he meant by that is that they're not going to sign one actor on for 9 films. I assume
that's exactly what
a film and then maybe its sequel if it does well. I think they're just trying to go back to the original way of doing things, but
yeah, I think the key word is the massive part.
Yeah.
You know, not so much like we're signing you on for, like you said, 9 pictures,
like Sebastian
6
Stan.
picture deals. Yeah. So you don't get people kind of feeling like they're stuck.
Yeah.
There's some pros and cons into that, and obviously, you know, not really being a news portion anymore.
No.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds,
okay.
But
it's definitely involved with the film itself because it feels like this movie should have come out like 6 years ago, back in phase 2, phase 3. And I don't know, it kind of threw me off. Not to mention there are a lot of story elements that are cheesy. They're not bad. There's no like
tongue in cheek, maybe.
No, not that. It's just that it's very. I felt like we were past the comic book things where one of the villains is able to avoid getting captured because of pheromones, and there's a lot of like, hey, there's this problem that the main characters are trying to solve, but the villains have this reason that the problem exists and they can't overcome it, and they found a solution to that problem. Well, now they have a new problem to give the protagonists because they just happen to have it. There's a lot of just like new problems to give the protagonist just because, to kind of pad out the runtime. And what I will say, the what this movie has going for it is the character work and the by that I mean just the way that the actors interact, the performances. Thank you. I don't know why I blanked on the word performances. The performances from the actors are what really make the film. It's very heartwarming. The action scenes are great. I kind of dogged on the CGI for Loki and some of the more previous works just because of how like ho-hum it's been. There's great action choreography. I think Taskmaster was a fantastic villain to use, although I feel like they underutilized that villain. There was a lot of potential with that villain, and Taskmaster has always been kind of a B-list villain for heroes
B
to
or
use.
C tier.
But like there was potential there, and what they used that villain for, especially when it comes to the third act, it left much to be desired, especially with the other alternative villain. Yeah, especially the actor Ray Winston can do so much better than what he did in this movie. I would give it like a solid 7. Like if you love Marvel movies, you're gonna enjoy this movie. If you love good action movies, there's great action in this. I definitely left the theater going, that was fun. I would watch this again, in a couple of months, or like when I'm rewatching some of these newer movies like Spider-Man, just to get caught up to date for Phase 4 and. As we get into...
Well, this is the first one of Phase 4.
This is technically,
right?
yes, the first one of Phase 4, because Spider-Man Far From Home was the epilogue of the Infinity Saga. Yes. But it's still important because it will lead into future properties. But I'm interested... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I will say, without spoiling anything, there is a post-credits scene that directly ties into future Marvel Disney Plus series. So this is actually... the first time we've gotten that indication of both the series tying into the movies and the movies tying into the series. However, this was supposed to come out after one of the previous series introduced a character in a scene. You'll know it when you see it, Zach.
I think I already know who you're talking about.
Yeah, because
I believe when this character showed up, there was talk about how that was it was supposed to be flip flop,
but it's okay. Yeah. Like even when you watch the post credit scene for this movie, it'll still make sense because there's not like a timeline wise. Anyway, with the news that one of the characters from Black Widow will show up in a Disney Plus series, it all kind of makes sense. So it made me more interested in that show than I was previously. I don't want to say anything because I feel like it's spoiling too much, and people.
Yeah, I think if you, I mean, I think if you have watched all this series up to this point, you probably know. Yeah. Anyway, even if you haven't seen the movie,
but go Hawkeye. You know, be interested in Hawkeye. I gotta move on to the other things. So I could talk about Steven Soderbergh's No Sudden Move, which is on HBO Max. It's a decent time period gangster drama heist mystery.
This is the Don Cheadle one?
Don Cheadle, Brendan Fraser, wow, why am I blanking? Oh, help me out. Benicio del Toro, Ray Liotta, ensemble cast, great cast.
Yeah.
The only thing for me is that, and it may have been the time that I was watching it, but it just felt a little slow in parts, especially the lead up into it. But it's a very, very stereotypical action film. I would just say, like, I feel like Steven Soderbergh has done better. A solid like 5 or 6 out of 10.
Oh, John Hamm,
but he's so brief in it. Like, a lot of the actors in this movie are so brief in this movie, even though
that's the risk you run with ensemble casts, right?
That's very true, especially heist crime dramas. But there are some twists and turns in there that I wasn't expecting, and honestly surprised me. If you're into films like that, you'll definitely be into that. It's on HBO Max right now. I also watched the Resident Evil Infinite Darkness series, although it's technically it's a CG movie, just like Vendetta and Degeneration and I forgot the Damnation. It's just like those movies. In fact, it's actually created from employees from the previous animation studio that did Vendetta and Damnation.
The only one I ever watched was Degeneration.
Yeah, and I mean that was way back in the day when they were like just like.
I think that was the first one.
I think so.
It was either the first or the second one. Yeah.
And this series, it's 4 episodes of 30 minutes, but it's basically just a movie split into 4 parts.
It's like a mini series essentially.
Yeah. And it takes place right after Resident Evil 4. I won't go into this because it's all video games and stuff. But if you haven't played the Resident Evil games, you should. They're fun. It takes place 2 years after Resident Evil 4. Leon, having saved Ashley. Leon. Yeah, they even show a picture of her, and you're like, ugh, that fucking chick. I'm gonna throw her back in a dumpster.
Wait, they Sean Connery someone in a CG movie?
I mean, yeah, they essentially she's not dead. She just doesn't show up for the movie.
No, that's so weird. It's like
they do that all the time in movies.
I don't know. That's weird to me. Like, it makes sense for a live action thing. It's like, oh, we couldn't get the actor. Obviously, we don't want to recast, so we're just gonna write him off, and then like, oh, there's a picture, and then it's something for the main character to look solemnly at. But when you're doing everything computer generated graphics, all you need is a VA.
Yeah. I mean, it might have just been a creative choice to not include one of the most annoying characters in video games, but who's to say? Yeah. But it's all non-canon really, because stuff that basically sets up for like future games like Resident Evil 5 and 6 doesn't really matter because they don't reference the events of this movie in 5 and 6 because there was no plan. It's just when it comes to like video game movie adaptations,
typical middle entry problem that has happened after the sequel. So obviously the sequel doesn't talk about anything that happened.
Exactly.
In Resident Evil, actually, this happens a lot. Same thing with like Zero. And like Zero, is it Zero with the train?
Yeah,
that's the train, right? Yeah. That's basically not referenced really at all until way down the line. But like, there's no reference to that because
Rebecca never shows up in any of the other games. Like, so she shows up in 1, but that's only because it came out the same year as 0 because they were simultaneously developing the games. But they were trying to create a backstory for one character that shows up in a part of another game.
But that was specifically a RE remake. You know, that wasn't even like
right. But like that's
that wasn't the original.
Right, but that's
the 1998 or whatever.
The Resident Evil remake in 2000 is like it's canon now.
Yeah, but it's like that's like saying
video game podcast now.
Of course they're gonna do that. It's like the twin snakes of the Resident Evil Metal Gear Solid. But so like of course they're gonna tie it into that because you know you're given the opportunity. But when you just have your normal timeline, like you're obviously Zero came out on the GameCube a decade after the first one came out on the PlayStation, right, so you can't do that.
But that's what I'm saying is they're creating a backstory for a character for I don't know, to make a whole other game because they wanted to. Yeah. So it's just like your example of Metal Gear Solid. Anyway, Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, you can watch it, you can skip it. I would say that you should be more interested in the live action Resident Evil series that's coming out later this year. That one is actually going to be an adaptation of Resident Evil 1, the fucking game we were just talking about. And hopefully with a little bit more love and care put into it, and not just a hour and a half long FMV, if you know what I mean. That's for you older gamers. Anywho,
I want a Resident Evil AMV.
Oh, did I say FMV? I meant AMV.
FMV works too. Yeah. It's just different. AMV would be the anime equivalent.
Oh, no, I had it backwards. You threw me off. That's AMV. Yeah, it's the fucking like early 2000s YouTube.
Yeah, you get your fucking Dragon Ball YouTube videos and then overlay Linkin Park on top of it when Vegeta's like crying in the rain and shit. I want that. I want it like a
become so numb.
So numb.
Damn it, we circled back to a fucking music podcast. Damn it. Anyway, you could skip this one. It wasn't even that great. The villain is this guy who's a military guy, and he's like, I want justice, but I want to also spread fear because fear turns into terror. And like a third of his dialogue is either saying the word fear or terror. And it's still a lot like that Square Enix trailer for the new Final Fantasy spin-off game, where it's like everything's chaos. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Listen, you can lose some of the translation, but when you adapt it to America, especially when you're releasing it on Netflix, like change up some of the dialogue. You know what I mean? Anyway, moving on. I also watched Fear Street Part 1, 1994, and Fear Street Part 2, 1978. So Fear Street.
This is Eli Roth, right?
Nope. That is R.L. Stine. It's an adaptation of the R.L. Stine book series, who also created the Goosebump book series, if you're unfamiliar with those, or if you are familiar with those. This is more of a mature, like this was for teens, whereas the Goosebumps books were more for like younger kids and stuff. But
yeah,
this follows a group of kids as they're trying to solve the mystery of why this... It's got like two towns, Sunnyside and Shadyside, or Sunnyvale and Shadyside, and they're both been at odds with each other. Shadyside is like the trashy ghetto town, whereas Sunnyvale is like the perfect... Do you remember Parks and Rec? It's Eagleton and Pawnee, Indiana. So it's like Pawnee and Eagleton. If you've watched Parks and Rec, you're gonna have to cut all of that dead air out. I know you won't. I'm saying this now. I'm calling it.
No.
Cut all of this out. Anyway, it's basically about these two towns who have always been at odds with each other due to a woman being accused of being a witch back in the mid 1600s, and she basically cursed both of the towns with constant serial killers throughout time. Because like this witch chopped off her hand. She's like, I cursed this land. And so every couple of years, there's someone from Shadyside goes crazy and gets possessed and starts murdering people. And basically this trilogy of films. So like Fear Street Part 1, 1994 came out last Friday. I unfortunately wasn't able to cover it on the podcast, but I watched that. And then 1978 came out just a couple of days ago. And it's part 2 and continues the story. It's not just 3 separate films taking place in 3 different time periods, but it's like, and you've read Frankenstein. We've already brought it up, but you've read Frankenstein, and you know that it's a frame story, so it's actually characters telling a story and setting up the story of another one. So that's basically what happens with this one. So at the end of 1994, the surviving characters meet a survivor from 78, and they go over the story of how they survived. And then the final one, 1666, will go over to the origins of how the witch was accused, and there's like weird like possession time travel sort of things. I've only seen the preview for 1666, but
and when is that? Is this dropping like on a weekly basis?
Yeah, on a week. So it's like part one. That's what I was saying before. Part one came out last week. Part two came out just a couple of days ago, and part three will come out this coming Friday. So I actually think, I thought that they were 3 separate films. I didn't know that they were going to be tied together.
I thought they were. It was more of an anthology thing, like the American Horror Stories.
I had no idea until I realized that they used fucking the word part 1 and part 2 and part 3 and I'm like, oh, okay, it ties together. But yeah, I'm really interested. It's part 1 was very much a, like, it's kids trying to solve the mystery as to why this is happening to them. Like, because a kid goes crazy and murders people in a mall at the beginning, but then he gets stopped by a cop. But then all of a sudden somebody crashes their car and bleeds onto the ground, and then they get possessed and start murdering people. Jeez. And then other serial killers pop out of the ground and start murdering people. And they're like, what the fuck is happening? And like, it's not adults and like shitty people, it's like kids. Like straight up like 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds are getting like stabbed and murdered and chopped, their heads chopped off and everything. The second film, 1978, goes more of the Friday the 13th camp. I think Nightwing is what it's called. I was like, huh, Batman. And it basically takes place. He does not show up. He does not show up. It's not Batman related. But it's very Friday the 13th-esque in that it all takes place at this camp where like both of the towns send their kids off to go spend the summer, and one of the teenagers again gets possessed and starts axing everybody, including the poor little fat kid with glasses. And I don't know why it was split scene where it's like the character shows up to start axing people, and I'm like, holy shit, I feel sad for that little kid, because he's getting bullied by this popular girl from the other town, and she's able to get away because she's from the other town. She's not a shady sider. It's just really interesting. It's like, if you wanted a great like slasher film, I know we've been talking about a lot of horror movies recently, but that's not our fault. That's the release schedule of these streaming services. They're coming out with all of these movies because they weren't able to come out last year. Yeah. Although I think that was always the case with Fear Street. They were always supposed to be Netflix. And yeah, it's really interesting. I'm interested to see where it concludes for part 3. I wish I could have just kind of wrapped them all together at once, but over the course of 3 weeks, nay sir. Nay sir. Nay. What else did I watch? No, I basically that was all of it. I watched Super Troopers and I watched Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, but I feel like we don't have to talk about those if you don't want to.
We can. Those are kind of, I've seen one of them. I've never seen Super Troopers.
Are you fucking kidding me? You've never watched Super Troopers?
I've seen bits and pieces here and there.
It's one of the most.
I've probably at least seen half of the movie at this point.
Insanely quotable movies, man. Oh, we gotta watch that.
I've definitely seen both of the Ace Ventura movies. Yes, so I can quote.
Yeah.
Oh look, it's the Monopoly.
I could not stop crying. I was laughing that hard. I was quoting it and laughing, and I got choked up because I could not handle it. And him leaving the rhino's asshole.
The rhino.
Yeah. Which is always cut for television, which I understand for censor reasons. But like when you watch it in full,
a pretty gross
it's
scene.
Graphic. Because like when he's like shoulders through, he's just trying to get through. And the fucking family have like stopped their Jeep to look at it, not realizing that it's Jim Carrey coming out of that rhino's butthole. I totally.
I'm just picturing the scene.
It's so fucking funny.
His head's coming out.
It's for me actually the funniest part of that whole scene is when he's like, I gotta get out, I'm trapped, the fan's broken. It's when he just fucking pokes his finger out and is like just twirling it around. He's like trying to fist his way out of the rhino's butthole.
It is not, if for some reason you've never seen it, is not high comedy.
No,
by
no.
any stretch of the imagination.
The guy who wrote and directed
very lowbrow.
The guy who wrote and directed both Ace Ventura 1 and 2 is Steve Odenkirk. And if you don't know who that is, he wrote and directed Kung Pao Enter the Fist, the thumb animation movies, which I feel like everybody. I want to look at those again. It's been a while since I've seen those.
That is a piece of a very brief part of history, film history, that unless you lived or / suffered through it, there's no way even know what we're talking about.
Well, I mean, it's like the early days of YouTube. If you're not a very popular YouTuber that hasn't shut down their channel by now, all of those videos are gone. Like the 480p like square ratio videos.
Well, that was even before YouTube. Like that was like a.
But I mean that time period, that early 2000s time period. Everything was on DVD, where you could still buy DVDs at GameStop and stuff. Yeah. We should watch Super Troopers. We should just. I'm not saying we have to get high to watch Super Troopers because it is technically a stoner comedy, but I will say we should definitely get a pizza and just like get a couple chuckles in. It's so quotable. Like, I know you. So you haven't watched any of their other movies? Let's see, Club Dread or The Slam and
I've
Salmon.
seen Club Dread.
You've seen Club Dread?
Seen Club
okay.
Dread. Mm-hmm.
Well, what the fuck? Super Troopers 2. You should watch. Although you should.
Why would I watch the second one?
I know. I knew you were gonna say that. Well, speaking of sequels,
it's like watching the Reno 911 movie when you haven't watched this show.
What does that have to do with anything?
I don't know. For some reason, Reno 911 just popped in my head. Probably because cop humor,
I guess. But they're troopers. They're not cops. It's very pertinent to the story that they're not cops. They're facing off against the cops in that region. Like they're about to. Anyway, go watch Super Troopers because this has been Lights Camera Nonsense, keeping you updated despite our best efforts. If you would like to email in and have your questions read aloud on the show, you can email us at questions@lightscameranonsense.com, or you could just leave a message on our Patreon entries for each video at patreon.com/lightscameranonsense. Sign up for just $1. That's one large soda, just about anywhere, really.
Probably even less.
Yeah, sometimes it depends. Like in the summer, it's even cheaper. Make sure to tune in every week for all the latest news, reviews, and what else, Zach?
I'll do your news.
Just like that. Just like that. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Sexy.